that we've been working on that is actually in a pretty good state where we can actually demo it. We've moved on to working on vendor view and billing modules. We have those in development right now, but they're not really in a place to show. So let me know if there's any issues with hearing me. I'm just going to assume that everybody can hear me since no one said anything. Okay, so basically the way you'll get to the new modules, that first bullet that's Compass Next Navigation is just showing that this is where they will live now versus the separate apps that you go to now. And so that's, service schedule, vendor view, billing, vendor maintenance, all easy here underneath all the other things that you access in Compass already. Some of you guys might not see all these things depending on what expertise and like what area you work in. But so the first thing on the list is one of the things that we've completed is Compass ID. So this is just the new auto-assigned identifier for participants that can be shared like via email, and you can see it. We can share it now because it's not actual like PHI, like a social security number or Medicaid ID or whatever else you might be using to identify your participants. So that's been replaced in a lot of spots that anywhere really that we showed social security number. So for instance, in the participants node, so anytime you pull up the participant summary, just gonna search my brother, which is fake data. You can see the Compass ID is here now instead of social security. It's in here as well. Top. And then if you went to the participant, you could see it in the case file too. Scroll down. This is a fake social security that I put in. And you can see that it's read only. You can't change it. It's just assigned as soon as we do the conversion for all the existing people. And then it's assigned when you create new people after this new release is out. I guess I can show you in the case file as well where that is. So you can search on it now. If I search I'll get a bunch of fake data. That's my last name. This is fake too. It's Beth and Melissa. And you can see that Compass ID is in here now as well. So it's in all these like different context reports we have. So we just put it anywhere that SSN was, but we still have SSN in the system as well. It's just that after this release, then we're going to make SSN editable and no longer required. And we're going to get rid of all the dummy SSNs in the system because we're not going to need that as a key identifier anymore. So that's Compass ID. So then let's go to vendor maintenance. Okay, so this is the main vendor tab where you'll add and edit and manage your existing vendors. And so the vendor dropdown is where you'll see all the vendors associated to your agency. So I logged in as WISP 10, so you can just see a bunch of vendors that they're working with. I added a couple fake ones that we can look at. Just so you can see what this looks like filled in. So basically, like I said, this is just a list of all the vendors that you're associated with. And then once you select one, you can see all the different fields or configurations you've set for them. So these are kind of some important ones over here. This is the vendor view where you notify or where you set if this vendor uses vendor view or not. And same with vendor billing, which we're now just calling billing since technically agents use it too. So we just want to stop calling it vendor billing. And then you can say if you want to have an expanded assessment report or none. So you can't actually check this unless your vendor view is yes. If you change it vendor view to no, then it'll automatically change this to no selection because it doesn't make sense to set this if you don't use vendor view. Cancel out of that. And then these also have some snowballing effects, I guess. So if this vendor has any users added, then if you change the vendor level setting right here, where you change vendor view equal to no or billing equal to no, then any users that are added to the organization, all their individual permissions will be wiped clean as well if you take that away. I'll show more on the users later, but this is basically pretty similar to how you kept your vendor information before, but I know that these configurations weren't exactly in the same area that they are, or grouped with the same data that they are now. And same with the contact information. That was in vendor view, I believe, and now it'll be with the vendor information in vendor maintenance. So these are just those new checkboxes that you guys requested for signifying if the vendor's on probation or if you need a whole payment. What else is new? The residential setting drop down that we talked about. Then we have a couple new fields like website. Well, actually, website I think we did have. Can't remember. Service area is definitely new. This is where you can mark the different service areas that your vendor serves. If you don't select any, then I think we decided that would be assumed that you serve everything, so that you don't have to go in here for every vendor and click on every single county. But if you do want to be specifying that, that's how you would go about doing that. You can also type in this field to narrow it down as well. And then just click them, and then they show up top. Oops.
This is John with Region 4. I have a question. This might be a luxury request, but I wonder if it'd be possible if we're at a stage where, for the vendor code, where we might have an option for Compass to auto-generate a vendor code for us. Currently, what we do is we have an extra database where we randomly create one there. It might be a nice and efficient way of allowing Compass to maybe manage those numbers there for us.
I mean, we definitely could do that, but I think the problem is, I think not a lot, I don't really know this, I guess I'm just guessing, but I know some agencies use the vendor code to distinguish certain systems they already have, so picking it is helpful. So I don't know if that's going to work for everyone. Is there anyone on the call that actually uses the vendor code and can defend that way of manually assigning it, or no? Because if no one's using vendor code anymore, then that's definitely something we can look into. Melissa, do you know if anyone does?
I mean, we can certainly bring that up on a future design call. At the stage we're at now, though, I have a feeling that we're kind of just going to leave it as until we get 4.1 done, because that's much more important right now. But we can certainly look into it as a post 4.1 if that's what everybody would like to do.
Okay.
Or get rid of it entirely.
Yeah, if it's not really needed.
Right. Now, there are a couple chat questions here. There's a request to make the Compass display screen a bit larger. I don't know.
Is this helping?
That looks better. The other thing too is if there's three dots vertically on the bottom of your screen for more options, and you can change the layout to be either change the layout or you can click full screen, and that should make it bigger too. Some of you may be looking at the panel of participants or the chat, and those can make it the screen reduced too. Another question was, is it possible to only show the counties we work with? When we talked about that on the design call a long time ago, we had many agencies that wanted to include more counties than what was worked with, because sometimes it's overlapping, sometimes they serve other counties than their normal waiver ones because of different projects they do. So we decided to just include the full list here.
I didn't see those, so thanks for looking at those.
Yep.
I see now that Cindy Cole says, Region 8 uses a provider ID system too. I mean, I feel like I've seen that, but I was just kind of guessing. But we can still look at that in the future. Okay, so where were we? Basically, that was it. We have a lot of similar validations that we had previously, where you can't delete a vendor if there's rates attached to it already, or if users have ever been added, then you definitely can't delete it. So I actually added some users. So you'll see an error like, oh, can't delete this. So really you can only delete a vendor if you added them right away and then you didn't mean to and you haven't gone any further, no users, no rates, then you can delete it right away. Just allowing special characters basically. So I can't type like, I don't know, some special code here because that's how we separate things down the line in claims and encounters. So that'll mess stuff up. So can't do something like that. Validate for valid MPIs. So I can't type crazy stuff here either. It'll know that that's not a real guy once I click save. And then this is actually a conversion note. The validates address 1 cannot be a PO box. I could type some PO boxing in here at this point, but during conversion, we're going to get rid of that stuff. So that's just a cleanup thing. Validates zip codes to Michigan if the state is Michigan. So that's just, checking that these are actually valid. And then I already talked about that you can't select silly combinations up here with these configurations. We basically stop you. And then if you change these from yes to no, we're going to clear out any users that have the vendor view privilege or the billing privilege and so on and so forth. Okay, history, that's down here. So you can click it, see all the different changes that have been made to the record. And that's kind of standard, like we have history now with the option to print. And then what else we have? Conversion. So we're converting fields from MySys and vendor view. So these are the fields from vendor view and some of the contact information was from vendor view and combining that all into the vendor record here. And then, like I said before, if PO boxes exist in the address fields, then we're going to move those to the vendor notes because that's not valid to have in the address. And then we're only going to be converting vendors that have had rates since 1/1/2012 with purchase care plans or rates on or after 10/1/2021. So get rid of some old data as well. All right, so the vendor rates tab. So the big change here is that we can now set all of our rates at the procedure, modifier, standard remark, and custom service level compared to just setting rates at the procedure level. Well, the service level. That's how you guys see it now. And so that's, I kind of added a couple. I probably doesn't make sense to have these three things together, but I just was playing around and adding data so you guys could see things in the rates tab when we're doing this demo. And so I have this Entrol formula one where I have a custom service selected. This is completely customizable by the agent specific data, which we're going to get to in a minute, but I just wanted to show you. So there's like the list of different options that I've entered for agent 10, and I'm logged in as WIPS 10 looking at one of the vendors, so then I can see all those different options for this service code. And so the way you add new rates to is you would just add the rate button. You can pick whatever start date you want using this little calendar control guy or typing. And then we have all the procedures, modifiers, and standard remarks loaded into rates that are possible. You can type in here to look for whatever it is that you might be looking for. And then the list will be filtered. And then the modifier and standard remark columns are filtered based on what you choose. So this must not have any modifiers or standard remarks associated with it. Whereas something that does, then you can just see the different options here. And then the short name will be updated based on what you pick in these. And so that's how that works. The units and costs defaults are still optional. You can leave them at 0 and you can save, and that's perfectly fine. Or you can set them to whatever you want, whatever makes sense. And these defaults set here will end up showing in the service schedule. You can delete rates like easily if they haven't been used yet. So that's kind of how the rate area works. The multi-record editor has, when you start having the amount of rates that actually are typical for a vendor, and especially when you're looking at all rates and looking at the different ones that have been stopped in the past, it's a lot more crucial that we have this multi-record editor form where you can add rates and change and stop date stuff at the same time, so that you can do things easily data entry wise, but we can also validate everything. And we kind of have a lot of problems when we're actually looking at a lot of data. It's just, I did this fake vendor so that it was easy to demo basically, but we're having a lot of issues with how we validate things. So we were kind of working on a reface of this same process, same data, like same columns, everything like that, but the whole interface might look a little different just to get rid of some of the bugginess that we are dealing with right now. We also have a lot of same validation and restrictions that we had before. You know, the rates have to fall into the date range of the national code list, which we have imported behind the scenes, and then they have to match, you know, valid code combinations, which we kind of help do along the way with limiting each of these columns based on what you've selected. And then you still can't have the same service code overlap or be duplicated with the same rate. And then rates cannot have consecutive rate lines with the same coding and same cost per unit. This is all kind of just same rules as we have today, but we implemented them here. And yeah, you can't delete rates when they've been used in a service event. And you need, the new thing is you need a special permission to change any rate, existing rate that will change the default cost units where service events are associated to it. So that just means if one of these services, let's say this guy has a bunch of service events added where this vendor was used in this service combo, that means these default rates are being used in the service event to determine, you know, what the default cost and default units are. If I update this for like something like year-end change, or I don't know, maybe I made a mistake, then that's going to in turn update all the service events related to that rate. And so since that could be kind of catastrophic if you weren't aware of what you're doing, it's also really helpful so that you don't have to go and stop these rates and add new rate lines just to make these changes. You know, it's supposed to be meant to help you, but since it's kind of something that changes a lot of events, we wanted to put a special permission on that so that you have to have this extra permission to be able to do those changes. You can just give that out to the people that that's appropriate for. Only rates that have been in effect since 1/1/2012 are going to be converted. And then we're going to change, will be converted, and their start date will be changed to 1/1/2012 if it's earlier. So that just means ones that have been open longer than that, we're not going to use the old start date, so that we can say that basically it's a hard cutoff at 1/1/2012. And then they have to have a purchase care plan or a rate started after 10/1/2021 to be, you know, in addition to that, to get converted. And then the conversion will include services that require a modifier or standard remark codes we previously thought could not, such as T100. However, if those codes were not used in care plans since 10/1/2021, then we cannot convert them, since we will not know how they were used to create rate records with required modifiers or standard remarks, because we just didn't have that information saved like that before, since we only saved at the procedures level. So that's rates. Are there any questions before I move on?
What text can be entered in the procedure code to bring up the code? Does it have to be the service code itself, or can you type in like transpo to bring
Yeah.
up transport?
You can type in letters too. So now you're getting all the non-emergency transportation.
And are those field sliders? So you could expand it if you.
Yeah, I don't think they are, which kind of sucks because there's so little. I think it's only once you've selected it, you can see a tooltip hover, which maybe isn't true.
Yeah,
guess-
this is part of we don't like this interface necessarily.
Yeah,
It's troublesome. And I do want to caution though, these are the national code list. So we can't control if they're using the word that you're trying to find in that code. You'd have to make sure you knew that. The
So then
transportation usually is used unless it's a bus pass. It may not have the word transportation in it, things like that. So knowing the codes is pretty important, I think, at this level. But when you get down farther, maybe into service definition or whatnot, where it'll limit, based on the vendor anyway, it'll be a short list for them. So it won't be as difficult as the full list you're seeing in here.
I think we are fixing the tooltips. Yeah, we have an external contractor helping us fix some things about this interface. So I made a note to make sure because I remember when we were playing in here too, Mel said the same thing, like, I can't see it. But okay, so that's that. The agent custom service, yeah, just to spend a little more time on that. So the way you add these, just a refresher, since we're doing this for everything, go to Navigator, in Tools, Agent Specific Data, and then Custom Services. This is something you have to have permission to see and edit and delete. Oh, fun. Oh, here we go. It's just a little slow because I'm presenting. So you can see a summary of all the ones that we've added now. And to add something or change it, you just have to click the edit button. So you can see all those ones we have for B4150 already added. And then I added this Emily's test earlier, and you can see it wasn't in the list right now because I have it as active set to no. So if some of these become where you don't need to use them anymore, you can deactivate them, or maybe you want to add them, but it's not time to actually turn them on yet. You can use that active button, that yes, no, that's what that means, is whether it will show up in the list or not yet. And then the way to add these is you just click add, and then this uses all the combinations of service combinations that exist are in this list. So that's kind of, a lengthy guide as well to look through. I think you can type in it right away. Oh, yeah, I can. If I start typing B4150, then I'm down here in the list, and I can then add another custom service if I want. So time call, done. And then it defaults to active. So if I save, I should be able to see that in the rates now. So I'm going to go back to vendor maintenance. And if I want to change this now, I can see design call demo and select that. And so that's how the custom services appear in rates. Oops, can I click out? That's another thing that's annoying about the current interface. Okay, now moving on to users. Oh, there's a page here.
Oh, Emma, I wanted to stop for a second. There's a couple things. So those custom rates, the whole purpose of them was to delineate between different types of rates for various reasons. And we went through exercises before in the past for what that may be, but specific DME items, like you saw, like we put in the different grab bar sizes with the coding, was it chrome or whatever color? Because we noticed on some lists that those were different prices for different sizes, obviously, and then the different styles. PERS buttons, if it's going to be the medical alert bracelet versus I can't even remember what those things were, but there was things about PERS units. And then the types of liquid nutrition, which, we commonly use because that makes great sense to us that because there are different prices occasionally for those. But anything you really want to create a different rate. But I do want to point out, not everything will need a custom rate. We tried to do an exercise early before, and we can certainly do that again with you guys when we get closer to doing all these things. But you can still leave that empty and not assign it. You don't have to put in the default rate. Like said, you can leave the units and cost per unit at 0 and just override it all the time, just like you do today. It would be for things that are consistently a thing you want to store. It is a recurring type of service, possibly, because those are the ones that over time, if the rate changes, you make the change in here as of whatever date it's effective, and that automatically updates all the related events to that. So that's where we don't have to have rate change anymore. So anything that you don't want to perform a rate change on in the future are things you're going to want to create an agent custom service for.
Sorry, I forgot.
That's all right. That's what I'm here for.
I'm just like, oh, I don't know how those work. Okay. So are there any questions on those before we move on? Okay. So this is where you can see all the users associated to the current vendor that's selected. And you can just change this to look at the different vendors and update any user information, vendor user information that you need. So this is where you manage that. Also, if you give a user, so let me click on one, it's me. They have different privileges. This is where you can assign, like this, they should have the permission to access vendor view, billing, vendor maintenance, and or receive notification emails. If you give them the vendor maintenance privilege, then this vendor can actually start managing and adding users for that vendor themselves. So then if you don't want to have to manage it yourself as an agency, then you can give one of the people or several of the people that work at that vendor this vendor maintenance privilege, and then they'll be able to go in and update their information and change their last name or update their password, or, whatever it is, manage the privileges. They can do all that themselves then and add their own users and disable them. Actually, never mind, they can't disable them. We talked about that on the previous design call, that we don't want them to be able to disable users because users that are associated to multiple vendors, when you click disable user, this will actually disable the user for all vendors and agencies that they're associated to. And so it's possible for one vendor to work maybe in an area where one agency covers one area that they work in, and then another agency covers the other, but they work for both of these vendors. And so they can be added to the system where they technically work for two different agencies. And so if you click the disable user button, then we make sure to alert you, hey, this is going to disable the vendor user for all agent vendors. So click on the associated vendors button and see who they're associated to before you do this, and you can continue, and then it really will remove the privileges from all the agent vendors they're related to. Or you can cancel and go look at that and make sure, like, oh yeah, see, they're related to more people than I thought. They don't just work for just us. So this is how you can see that. Maybe it's appropriate though. It would save time for either a vendor user or agent user to go in and remove the privileges from all the different vendors that they may possibly work from or forget to work from, or maybe agent 2 isn't notified when agent 10 is doing this, and it just kind of opens a line of communication that, oh, hey, this user said they're done. Is this appropriate with you? And then you can do that and kind of save some time by removing all the privileges at once. You don't have to. You could also just go into privileges, and if you're not sure, and just remove them from the vendor that you're looking at right now and save. And then that's just letting you know that, this is going to disable them for this vendor, and then you can click continue. And now they won't show up in under active users, they'll be under all, and they're disabled for just this vendor versus disabling them with this button, which disables them for all the vendors they're associated to. So there's ways to do both things. So it doesn't have to be, just done one way. You don't have to be worried about removing privileges from other agent vendor associations that you're unsure of. And then to enable them, this button changes from disabled to enable, and all it's going to do is make you give them at least one of these major 3 permissions up here. If you just do notification emails, it's going to be angry because you need to have vendor view to have notification emails. So that's kind of like a short demo on the privileges. Underneath, you may have seen these contact types. These are new. So if you select different contacts here, like, oh, this is my billing contact, or this is the CEO director at this vendor, blah, 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 whatever it is, then they'll also show up in the contacts tab. And then you'll see what type of contact they are. And then the same information, if you click it, you'll see the same information. This is shared between contacts and users. And then you can actually add users as contacts via the add contact button. If you end up entering information that's the same as user data that you've entered, then it's going to recognize it. So let's try to add same information as, who do I have? Melissa, Owen. Okay. So for instance, Melissa at chess.com. And it's going to say, oh, I already have this as a user. Did you mean to just add this person? So then you can continue with them. And if you wanted to just create a new contact, then you'd need to have a unique email. So if I click create new contact, it's going to say, oh, nope, you're going to have to use a different, well, first of all, I've selected one. Sorry. Can't do that. Email is already in use. So kind of checks for that. Otherwise, you could continue with that person if that really is who you intended to add a contact information for. So then you can enter their number and select what type of contact they are. So something that was requested to be able to record. And so this all is new in our interpretation of what was requested.
Does the other field allow for a text entry at all, or does it just identify it as other?
Yeah, it just is other for now. We were talking about different contact types. We pulled those a long time ago, and so maybe we need to revisit that. But there was kind of not a lot of where everyone was having the same thoughts on the other field. So we thought, oh, maybe we'll put this out there first and then go from there to see what other types of contact types you guys might want added in the future. But yeah, you cannot type in the other field. It's just a generic other. So that it like I was showing how you can add contacts that are already users. You can do the same thing with users. If you have them added already as a contact in the system and then they need to become a user, you just do that same process where you enter the email, first name, last name, and then if it's recognized in the system matching on email or last name, then we'll bring it up and show that as an option during the add user process. So that's nice that these two are working in concert, so there shouldn't ever be duplicate information that has to be added. Let me check my bullets to see what I'm missing here. Like I said, the email has to be unique, hence all the cleanup we've been having you guys do, and we've been doing ourselves to help out. And then, the privileges, those are dependent on the vendor privileges. So if your vendor isn't set up to have vendor view, then this is going to be grayed out, and you can't obviously give a user vendor view if the vendor doesn't use vendor view. So these are basically snowballed down the line from however you set these up. So if I change this to no, actually I can't because I already have, well, I can. It's just going to remove it from all the users I have already given vendor view to. So I can click continue. Now, if I go to these users, you'll see that the vendor view, vendor maintenance, and notification emails are all grayed out because I took away vendor view, and we assume if you're not using vendor view that you don't have a need to use vendor maintenance either. And then some of these people actually had these privileges and they've been removed. And so you can see this actually disabled Emily Wee because her only privilege she had when I took that away was vendor view and notification emails. And so since those were taken away, now she doesn't have any privileges. And so now she's considered inactive, but you can easily change all this by either updating the vendor's settings to be yes again and giving them privileges again, or just giving them billing if that's what's appropriate, whatever. So that's just, I wanted to show how those are associated with each other. I showed you the associated vendors button, and users can't be deleted. So you can see there's no delete button. Once they've been added, the only option to do is just disable them. We went over the prompts. The option to send welcome email is this little email button or mail button, whatever, envelope right here. We no longer will be doing that automatically when you add users. So because sometimes people aren't finished adding the permissions or setting up their password or, doing whatever it is that you want to do. So now instead that'll just be done when you're ready manually. So after you've added someone new, you can just click this button. You can send this. Oh wait, this person isn't enabled. Do this one. And then it'll just send the email, welcome email. Vendor view users. So we're basically converting everybody that we can, but if there's no email address, or if the email address matches another, then they're not going to be converted because we need to have unique emails. Also, all passwords are going to need to be reset with this release because we have new password requirements. I'm not going to go through each of them. They're listed in the demo notes, but there's just, I think the main changes are that we now won't allow this. We're checking against this deny dictionary, which is just easily cracked passwords like password or 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know, just like any generic passwords. That's from this database that we've basically found that helps keep passwords a lot tighter, I guess. I don't know how to describe this better. They're upper and lowercase sensitive. And then we also, I think we already did this now, but not a really great job of it. We're more strict on not allowing your user's first name or last name. I think we only check last name right now. Maybe that's not true. I'm not sure, but all I know is we've updated these to try to make them a little stricter. So that might make you sad, but it always makes me sad. But that's what we got to do to stay in line with security. And I think that's it. So moving on to service schedule. This is the replacement of care plans. I'm so used to calling it the service schedule now because we've been working on it for a while, but I know that's not what you guys call it. So you can navigate here by the left menu. I have this, collapsed a little bit. So that's how you get to the service schedule. And then to do anything, you have to pull up a participant. You can search on all your open participants or all, which is going to include closed people too. So I'm going to type fast because as soon as you start typing, basically it starts showing you participants, and I don't want to show participant data that isn't the fake demo data I've added. So I'm going to type on my last name, and you can see these fake people I put in. And so this is how you'll select whoever you're looking for to pull up their service schedule or their care plan calendar. And so you can also search for the closed people and to see if someone's closed. I changed these sweet people too. You'll see the red closed date. So that's how you easily can see if someone's closed versus open. I'm going to select this fake person here, which I've added some service staffs. So now you can see I have him selected. This is how you can always access the participant summary from the service schedule. So that pulls that up with all your go-to easy links, like to the participant, to everything else, like you're familiar with now. But that's right here. And then up on the top here, this data grid on the top is where all the service definitions are. I can't think of what those, I guess that's the care plans now. And then the calendar entries, the service events are your templates, I think. I'm not as familiar with the old language, but so to see what service events are related to these service definitions, you just select them over here. You can select all or select which ones you want. And then that's going to bring up all the events that are associated to the different service definitions. So I've added a bunch of fake data. I just want to mention these colors are horrible and they're not what we're going with, but we have someone helping us with the redesign of the UI aspect of this part of things so that it looks nicer and less busy and just angry colors in your face. We're gonna fix that. Haven't got there yet. So I guess I didn't really talk about, well, a lot of things. So the service defs, they match fields from the care plan, like we said, and the validation is mostly the same, except that now we're going to validate against fund source as well. And so if you click on one, you can see we have fund source saved in the service def to be able to do those checks now as well. And then what else is different? Oh, this is another thing that you need to have a special permission for. Since changing this information could have downstream effects as well to any service events associated to the service definition. So anytime we have these types of changes that are, I guess I would call scary, we put an extra permission on just to make sure you're only giving those to the staff that it's appropriate for. Like we said before, your end turn goes away because the stop dates are no longer required. So you can have services that just go on forever and then you can stop them when it's appropriate. You can also enter future stop dates. We don't have all the conversion completely worked out for this as it's quite complicated, but Melissa definitely has a pretty good start. It's how we have a lot of fake data in the system. And then what else? So when you're adding a service def, you would click this add service button and you kind of just go methodically from the top to the bottom, and we could keep filtering these drop downs based on what is selected above. So if you start this on March 1st, then you're only going to get vendors who have rates that have started on March 1st or after, or before, just as long as they have something that's overlapping that time range. And so already this vendor dropdown gets narrowed. And so then now once I select a vendor, then the procedure dropdown is narrowed by whatever procedures that vendor offers. And that's what's being set up in rates. And so you saw we had all these added in the rates area. And then the modifier, if there's only one option, and standard mark, if there's only one option, then it autofills. If there were multiple options, they would be shown. And then you can set the fund source, which whatever. I don't know what the fund source is appropriate for this. And this is where you can save any notes that the vendor will be able to see. Blah, blah. And then you can save this. And you'll notice that I didn't have a custom service option here in the service definition level. That's because that's actually stored at the service event level, so that if you had something like, I don't know, the B4150, and some days on Mondays you're receiving the boost, and then on Wednesdays you're receiving the Insure Premium, or I don't know what that stuff's called again, but it's so that you can set that at the service event level versus having to define that at the service def level. So if you click on one of these guys, well, that's not the right one, B4150, you can see I have, well, everything's grayed out because it's already a saved service event. So we show it like that so that you don't actually accidentally edit something when you're just looking at an existing service event. So to edit it, you have to go under actions and click edit. But then you can see, I guess I've only set up an option for a rate with design call demo. So that's what's under my custom service options. If I would have set rates up for this vendor with more of those custom services in the rate area, then I would see those options here. And then I want to make sure I've covered all the things about service def before I move more on to service events. Let me check my list. Okay, looks like it. Okay, so the service event, like we said, replaces the templates and then one-time events. And we have basically tried to implement something that's kind of similar to the Google Calendar, and especially in the repeating area. And so the way you can add repeats is by day, week, month, and year. Well, that's because I have date time selected. So each event type, I should start with a new one instead of editing. So that's this add service event button. I use this button down here, but you can also click in the calendar. And so depending on the view you are in, you can just click on a certain day, or you can highlight a time period. So like 7 to 8 or 8:30 I have. That's going to pull up the add service event, or you can just click. And then you'll see the service definition. That just defaults to whatever I have selected up here, which is shown over on the right side. But you can change that if you didn't, you still have this selected from doing something earlier, but you actually wanted to add something for this service definition, whatever. You'll see that the default units and default costs change depending on which service def you have selected. It's pretty standard. And then, like I said, so the repeat area is similar to how you can set up Google events in the calendar. So since I have date anytime selected, that means that this event could happen anytime within one day, and you don't have to specify the time, so you don't see time. If I click date time, you'll see that there's a time component shown, and then I can select, oh, this is happening, from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. And that's how I would do that. And the repeat options are all four. They're the same for date, time, and date. Oops, didn't select one. So I could say this happens every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then it's going to summarize this in words. Occurs every week on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, starting on 3/15. This is going to be the official start date from 12 a.m. to 11 a.m. So that's a bug, but we'll have that fixed. I should say 10 a.m. So those are the different repeat options for date, anytime. I'll pull those all up for date, anytime, and date time. They're the same. So I'm just going to show you now on here. Oops, I already did week. Sorry. Change that. Day. This is like if it repeated every single day. If it repeated every other day, you would do 2 days. If it repeats every 3 days, you can do that. Or there's months. This would repeat every other month right now. And then you could repeat it on a specific day, or on a date versus on a day, like the first Sunday or the third day of the month, which is going to be kind of similar to just choosing 3 on the date area, or the last Friday, whatever you want to be setting up. That's how that works. And then there's also a year where you can do like a yearly repeat. I don't know, something that is annually renewed. So those are the options for date, anytime, or date time. They're the same options because you can apply the same repeat pattern, whether it's happening at a specific time or anytime during the day. Then there's weekly anytime as an event type. These are the ones that are displayed for the entire week like this. And so we're going to, like I said, update the formatting so you can see the difference between these event types easier in the calendar. But let's go back. So weekly anytime, you'll see it defaults to the first day of the week. So today's 3/15, but it's Tuesday. So Sunday was 3/13. So that's what it defaults to always. But you can change it to like a weekly anytime might not actually be authorized to start until Thursday. That's fine. You just select that day, but they'll always, you can't change the stop date. They'll end on Saturdays at the end of the week. And then if you're repeating it, which you have to for weekly anytime, say you repeat it every week, then that just means the next event will be, so if the first event would be the 17th, the 19th, because that's when it starts. The next would be the 20th to the 26th, and the next would be the 27th to the 2nd. And so on and so forth in that fashion. And then you can stop them by adding an until date. And that's just gonna, so if you need to cut that short of a full week because, that's just truly a hard stop when the participant stops needing services, then you can do that. And this is going to make my calendar so full, but I'm just going to do it anyway. So you can't really see it because there's a lot of stuff already added to this, but you can see that it stopped on the 31st versus going the full week. And then, did I start that in February? Maybe. Well, and then it started at not at the full beginning of the week because must be the start date I chose, unless that's a different event. Oh, no, I started it here. Okay, so last type is month anytime. I'm not going to save and add this to the calendar because it literally will run across all the days and just make this even more busy. But just like the week anytime, it defaults to the first day of the month instead of the week and the last day of the month. And you can update the start date and you can update the stop date by once you add if it's repeating every month or every 2 months, then that's basically saying, oh, this event or this service, can be provided anytime within the month. And then you can specify how many units. Let's say like you have 10 units that you don't care when they're delivered. Then you can say, use this type or the weekly anytime. And that just means that the service can be delivered with anytime within that week or month at this whatever repeating interval that you set. And then you can set an until date or you can leave it infinite. And so it'll repeat for forever. If you have a stop date in your service stuff, you need to enter an until date because you cannot have your service events go past your service definition. They need to lie within that date range. That's the service stuff. This is where you can specify which tasks need to be performed with the service event. You can type or check them. You can add as many as you want, whatever applies. You can uncheck them. The checked ones will move to the top of the list just to make it easier when you're looking at them, because if you have too many here, you'll run out of room for what you can see. See how it's cut off? So the way to see them is to open this drop down and then just see all the selected ones at the top. And then we also have this tooltip right here that it also lists them out. So you can see that easier than having to try to click in here and scroll over, or if you just don't want to open up the drop down. So that's that. This is where you can select the custom service. You can see it's active right now because I have a service definition where a custom service has been added. And you can change the default units. And if the default cost is not appropriate, then you can click this button here to override the default value and enter whatever is appropriate. This is a spot to track the service auth numbers for, I think, is that My Health Link that needs to use that. And notes to vendor, anything else that you want to put in that's just, not covered by this. So I haven't been really looking at my bullets because there's just so much with the service event. Make sure, I think I've covered most things here.
And while you're looking at that, I just wanted to point out that override. I mentioned it earlier, but this is a place that really illustrates it. When you do that override, what that means is that if the vendor rates change over time, anything that you've done that override rate to will not be updated. It's permanently going to be $33. If you'd left it at the 20, if the vendor rate changes next year to be $22, then the events would automatically be $22 from that point forward. But if you had changed it to 33 on any of them, like in this case, then that 33 is permanent until you come into the specific event and change it. So that's where we were kind of talking about. You want to make sure you put in enough of those custom rates to be able to have defaults for things and figure out what that may mean for your agency so that you do not have to go in and manually change a bunch of service events. Another thing I wanted to point out too was the service auth. She mentioned My Health Link. That's true. It's also going to be the future prior authorization number for the NIFTY. When we get to doing NIFTY claims and such, you'll have to apply for prior authorization and CHAMPS, and you'll get a number, and that has to be in there so it goes into the claims. So it'll have two purposes in the future.
Thanks, Melissa. And then if you don't actually want the override cost, you can click this button to go back to the default value. And then that can actually be done after one's added. So if you actually saved an override and then realized you were wrong, oh shoot, I don't even know which day I picked for that.
It's the red one.
Oh, it's the new month one that I said I wasn't going to add. Okay, so if you realize you're wrong, you click edit and then, oops. Why did it, I guess we have an error. It should be showing the 300, but you can use that button to go back to the default value, and then it will actually use the rate changes like Melissa was talking about if you made a mistake and didn't actually want an override value saved. So pretend that's working. And then to delete events, you can only, where this isn't correctly implemented yet, but we're not going to have this event, this following options for deleting. We're just going to allow you to basically delete the entire event or not. So if you add something incorrectly, you can always just make changes and edit it by updating the until date or updating the repeat pattern, but you actually will need to delete. If you don't mean to have the event, then we're not going to let you delete just specific events out of the pattern, because then you should really just be updating the repeat pattern. And so, or if it's this and following and you just stop it, then you should just be entering an until date. So the delete will just be for all events. So when you click delete, you'll see a little bit different prompt, and then you can delete service events out of the calendar as long as there isn't any billing done down the line. So just try to delete some of that stuff because this calendar is really quite busy, and I don't know how realistic that is. Maybe it is for some people, but I just wanted to go over the last two things, exceptions and non-services, and it's easier when you can see what's going on. So I've already added an exception here. You can see this pattern is a Monday, Wednesday, Friday repeat that's been going on for this S5120. And so since I moved the day over of when it's provided, maybe the participant couldn't do it that day, or I don't know what the reason is why, but that's going to be an exception. And so it'll show in different styling than the regular service events. And like I said before, this styling is not appropriate for what we're actually going to do. We're going to use like a little asterisk to show that it's an exception, because I think we use that in other places to delineate exceptions. And then I think we also are going to have a little E in the front. And all of these service event types in the front of them, we're going to show the type with the letter abbreviation. So it'll have like, I can't remember what letters we went with, but for the monthly anytime versus weekly anytime and date anytime and date time, like DT, I think is what we're doing for date time, and date anytime DA, or, so that you can easily see what type of event it is from the month view versus the week will show you a little bit better, because if it's a date time, of course, it'll show up within the time period on, each day, whereas the date anytime and monthly anytime will have to show at the top because they can happen anytime within the day. But even still, those can get to be grouped up and be a lot. So that's how we're going to help delineate those. But so anything that's changed about the service event for one instance of a repeating service event will be an exception. So if I changed the tasks for just this one event that's happening this Wednesday, if I save for this event, it's going to become an exception. If I saved it for this and following, then it's actually just going to change all the service events, starting with that one and after, to have those new tasks added. So it's not like delete, there are times when editing the service event definitely makes sense to make the changes for this and following, or just this event, or all events. If it's all events, it's going to go back and change everything starting with, whenever the service event started and so forth. So that's kind of like Google Calendar, same idea. So if I choose this event, like I'm trying to demonstrate an exception, and I click OK, then now you're going to see it's styled different. And so that's just true of editing anything on here. Besides notes, I think. Notes does not create an exception. Okay. So then there are oh, sorry, I should have said this. I see this note too. Note that decreasing the units is considered a non-service versus an exception. So if you decrease the units, we talked about this on a previous design call. We're going to assume that that is a non-service, because when we talked about it, we talked that there was really no time where non-service reasons shouldn't be able to be provided if you're decreasing the units that are scheduled for that day. And so that's going to automatically prompt you to enter a non-service, versus increasing the units would still be an exception. So just wanted to point out that difference. So non-services, this is currently this little odd green color with the cancel sign. So when this is done, these will actually be shown in red and highlighting, so that they're really obvious where non-services are in the calendar. And we are going to have this little cancel sign, but I think it's going to be a little bigger. And then we actually have two red stylings for non-services, because with 4.1, we're going to have partial non-services as an option. So with this units not provided, you could say only 2 units of the 4 total were not provided. And so that, when you save it, will have a different styling, which is like a lighter color red than a full non-service would have, which will have a darker color red. So that's not implemented yet, so you can't see that. But that's is simple. It's going to be super easy how you add non-services. I guess I already added this one, so I'll show you how to add one. Literally just click on it and click Actions, click the non-service button, and then you'll have to select a reason. I've got all the same reasons that you guys have now, and then you can write any notes that you need right here, and then we default to the full amount of units, but you can change it to you can change it from anywhere from 0, I think, actually, to the units. So I think we even allow decimals, which maybe we shouldn't be. Should we not be allowing decimals, or is that okay?
No, we shouldn't be allowing decimals.
So I guess we gotta fix that. Yeah, allow. Sorry, I'm writing a note. Okay, so any whole numbers between 1 and the total units. Maybe we already have a card to fix that, Mel. I'm not sure. And so that's how you add those, and then you can delete them once they've been added by just clicking this button, and then it's just saying, hey, you sure? Confirm. And then you'll see the styling will change back, and it'll fall back in the normal pattern. So I think that's it.
This is John in Region 4. I had a question related to NNSs. So I see that we have those Monday, Wednesday, Friday set up with date anytime. I wonder if there's a distinction between where it can be any time versus it can be any day. So if we wanted Monday, Wednesday, Friday as just what the service event shows, but then the provider does it Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, is there a way to communicate that to the vendor?
So are you saying, like, so maybe you would do like a weekly anytime, but you're saying you'd only want them to go from Monday to Friday?
So it could be that specific, but for many of our CLS services, we want 3 days anytime during the week. I'm not sure if weekly anytime by itself relays that bit of information. I was wondering if there's any options to have, like we currently have, with the days may vary and times may vary. Because maybe times are very static, but the days can vary. I wonder if there's any options for adding that in there.
I think currently we just have planned that you could note that in the notes to vendors area, but we definitely don't have anything set up to mark optional, times within that flexible time date range. The only other thing I'm thinking is we have for date anytime, you can set you can set a different interval, but that's only if it's a one-time event. So I guess it doesn't really help. So instead of it being from the whole week, you could set it from the 7th to the 11th. But then you'll see that the repeat option went away because you've made this a range versus a one-day, option. And so you could add multiple things of those. But if this is something that's repeating, that would not be, something you would want to do at all. So I think otherwise you would just have to note that stuff in the notes to vendor.
Okay. And then in instances with NNSs, are we able to, where we have a service event set up for a specific date, but they provide it on non-calendared days, but they're still acceptable? Are we able to add non-service events where there is no service event scheduled? So like on the 0009, the S5120, can we put an NNS on March 1st there? Or does it have to be?
No. Yeah, you have to have an event scheduled.
Okay.
But you could add a one-time event and then make it a non-service.
Or move whatever date it might be to. So if it was supposed to be on the second, for instance, and they didn't perform it on the first or whatever it may be, she's choosing the 28th, then you wanted 3-1 on that M. And so if you moved that to making an exception, like the blue guy, that's down below with those wrenches, that's the current exception, you can do a non-service on an exception.
Yeah, you can add that on top still. So you can move the day first and then add the non-service on top. That's what she just said, right?
Yeah. And otherwise the weekly anytime, we got rid of days and times may vary. We discussed that on prior design calls because we have the date anytime factor and the weekly anytime. And so the weekly anytime was meant to replace when you're like, I want you to deliver 16 units 4 days in a week, do it anytime you want. And so that's what the purpose, that was to replace the days and times may vary.
Okay.
I forgot.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you can also, it's not anything to do with this topic, but you can also delete exceptions still. We haven't finished all the delete development, but there should be a separate delete exception box, but because right now it's showing the wrong error or confirm warning, but you can see that once you delete the exception, it also will restore it back to the pattern. And so anytime you add stuff, you can always fix it if you're ever worried about that. So to finish up the service schedule display, if you hover over this stuff, we'll show you some more information basically. But the best way to see everything is to just click on it and then you can close it. The filters, we have current fiscal year and all. And I already showed clicking on the participant name will bring up the participant summary. And you can select which service definitions you want to see. If this is, color overload or just too many of service events to look at the same time, you can deselect them up here, which apparently it's not working. I think we already knew this, but when it's working better, if I have these two selected, I should only see the service events for those two and so forth. So I guess that's a little buggy still. Yikes. And then, like I said, the events will show a little bit different based on their event type. do mock-ups or do a demo, and we've finally got that part done, but that won't be for a while. We're just focused on getting the behind the scenes and the functionality working before we finish up design. And if it repeats, we're going to add an indicator of that as well, so that you can tell if it's a one-time event versus something that's repeating. And again, if you click on it, you can always see this information by, oh, there's no repeat information. Okay, that's one time, versus clicking on this and seeing the repeat info. So I think that's everything. Are there any other questions?
Can you open up one of those events that you had multiple rates set up? Did you have multiple rates set up for one of them?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because
I
we
ended up deleting that other one because I know it doesn't. The customer service don't work. You get a weird error.
Okay, I was just thinking that view associated rates button, we skipped over that in the event.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think you can still see it. There's just only gonna be one option.
Okay.
So is that this?
Yeah, I think you gotta be in edit mode.
Okay. So if you had multiple custom services, let's say set up with different prices, or just you want to see the rates associated to whatever you have selected, you click this guy and it has a little tooltip, show rate schedule for service. So that just means it's going to show you all the rates that have been added for that service combo. And it'll show you old ones too. So you don't necessarily need to be a custom service situation. It could just show you the way the rates have changed through time. And if there was multiple set up for this guide, then you would see a list of it. And so that's kind of nice to be able to look at this information from the service schedule versus having to go back to vendor maintenance, go in rates and see what the heck you have set up there. So.
Right, and it's especially important because service events are, when they repeat, are going to cover possibly more than one rate period. So over time, this service event might have lasted for 6 years, and over 6 years, there's been 5 rate increases. So you pull up one single event day to look at it, it's going to show you that event's default, but you can see prior ones for that event by clicking that.
Yeah, you can go further up, click on further where the rate changed, and then you can see, oh, it'll show different defaults. And so that's what she's saying with that button, but I guess you have to be in edit mode to use it. Okay, is that all now?
And then at the top right of the grid, the E column, that replaces the current T column in care plans to indicate that you have a event, one or more events associated to that service definition versus templates was to care plans. So it's basically replacing that.
I think we're adding a check mark though instead of a asterisk, because it kind of makes it seem like it's an exception, because that's what we're going to use the asterisk to denote in the calendar whenever there's exceptions and stuff. And since it starts with an E, but it's supposed to mean event.
Yeah.
So,
And then the 3 little vertical or horizontal buttons on that too.
these you're talking about?
Yeah.
Oh,
You know, if there wasn't any errors going on.
well, it's just the columns. You can get rid of them if you don't want to see them from the view. Those are the only ones that can be flexed out. The rest have to always be in view. So that's all those that is. Just ignore that error. And then this is going away, this extra service events tab. That was before when we had a different idea of how we're going to do things. So it'll just be the service definition slide out here. Okay, well, I don't have anything else. Mel, you feeling good about all that?
I can't see anything else. Oh, I guess it could point out, and you kind of alluded to this somewhat, but that service definition that you're seeing on the right-hand side with the fund source, the work we were doing on the last design calls related to, getting the fund source drilled down more. It will obviously change what's in that drop down now, but it also, here is where we're going to prevent you from saving bad code combinations for the main programs of the system. So we talked about, obviously, My Choice. We'll be adding eventually the nifty CTS, whatever you want to call it, today or tomorrow. Keep changing the name. And the My Health Link program and TCM. So you can't put bad code combinations for those programs if you choose those fund sources. So that will then eliminate the need downstream in the claims and encounters processes to have service match errors. It'll be a thing of the past because you couldn't get them in there. So a lot of people are probably hip hip and hooray because that'll eliminate a lot of need that, copy care plan and changing a bunch of bills over, way after the fact will prevent them from the start from getting in the future. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So I definitely just breezed right over that. Okay, so now I think we might be done. Are there any questions from anybody regarding this or anything else? If not, then I'm going to stop presenting and wish everyone a good rest of the day.
Thank you.